After a lot of reflection, I decided to take some time away from the charts these last few weeks. My trading during the challenge, up to date, hasn't been a great example of what good trading should look like, and I definitely wanted to address that and call it out. I broke a lot of my rules, I was very emotional, and took so many trades that I shouldn't have. And those are things that you want to avoid at all costs as a trader. So I highly encourage you to avoid the mistakes that I made and to learn from them. My biggest takeaway was that my strategy and plan wasn't specific enough for me. I feel like with the market structure shift and alternating between the 3-minute chart, the 5-minute chart, the 1 hour, the 30-minute, etc., I overcomplicated my trading. Because it wasn't specific enough, I started deviating from my rules. It was easier to deviate from them. And so something I wanted to improve upon was making my strategy very specific. So specific that I just can't break these rules. It's not open for interpretation or anything like that. And so I spent these last few weeks really trying to decide what strategy I'm going to use and making sure that it's a strategy that I could follow and something that you guys could follow along with me. And so I did land on a strategy that I want to forward test during these challenges, and it's going to be on both Forex and futures. And so I could show you what that will be now. During the last few weeks, I spent some time back testing different entries. I started off by testing a higher time frame, POY, sweep, market structure shift, and then specific types of entries. But when I started to forward test it, I started to realize that this still may not be specific enough for me, and I can actually show you. Jumping into TradingView here, full transparency, this is where the demo account currently stands. Current balance is $74,322.20. And it was around here during this forward test, started to realize that it honestly may not be specific enough with me in terms of the market structure shift and the POIs. Still found myself being emotional, and so decided to make it even more specific and opted to pursue a strategy that's more similar to the silver bullet strategy. And for those of you who don't know what the ICT silver bullet strategy is, there are specific time windows for this strategy, and within those time windows you want to enter on the first fair value gap that forms. The time window that I use for this strategy is 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but there are other windows such as the 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as the time window during the London session. Like I mentioned, I backtested different strategies, and so some of the strategies that I backtested were sweeps of the previous day high and low, followed by a 5-minute fair value gap between 8 and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Another one was this one, so sweep of the previous day high and low, followed by a 5-minute bias fair value gap that forms between 8 and 11 a.m. And what a bias fair value gap is pretty much if a previous day high was swept, then I would only look for bearish fair value gaps. If a previous day low was swept, I would only look for bullish fair value gaps. The win rate for this one for the month of August was 57%. And then for the previous one, it was 35%. Just picked different months during my back test because I knew that whatever strategy that I moved forward with, I wanted it to have at least a 50% win rate on a given month. For futures, I back tested August. For Forex, I backtested a mix of August and September. And so because this was less than 50% win rate, I didn't want to go with this one. So this one I was considering, but then I started learning more about ICT macros. And then I did see a post that said something about an inverse fair value gap during a macro time period. And I was pretty interested in that. And so I decided to backtest different things with that as well, different strategies. The one I finally landed on was this one. So this is based off of the post that I saw, but it's not exactly the post that I saw. The post just mentioned an inverse fair value gap during a macro. And so what I did, pretty much I took the macro times and just made it a whole window because it includes the silver bullet time window of 10 to 11. And so that's why I landed on the 9:50 to 11:15 a.m. time window to include the macros. So it's similar to silver bullet in that there is no bias for this strategy. So you're literally looking for an inverse fair value gap within 9:50 and 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be keeping in mind certain things like the market maker buy and sell models on the 5-minute. But yeah, the aim was to make this strategy just not really open for interpretation, honestly. And it had about a 67% win rate on MNQ for the month of August, and I also back tested this for Forex on euro dollar. And for the month of September, this had a win rate of about 57%. I will be using this strategy for both futures and Forex, and I will be forward testing it during the challenges. I didn't want to keep you guys waiting too long, but I definitely didn't want to rush this part because, as I mentioned, my trading up to date hasn't been a great example of good trading, and I really want to redeem myself with this futures challenge and moving forward. And the goal and the plan is to stick to this and really follow my rules. Did update the trading plan here. I still want to target 1 to 2 risk to reward. Going to be limiting risk to 1% of the trading count per trade. And I still want to journal all trades. Time window for this is 9:50 to 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I only want to trade NQ, but I'm going to focus on MNQ first. Similarly for Forex, I'm only going to trade euro dollar. Going over the strategy again, time window for this is 9:50 to 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we want to start by marking these times on the charts. And this is based on ICT macro times, like I mentioned. These are pretty much times where the algorithm is either hunting liquidity or rebalancing to fair value gaps. That's why this window is important, because with ICT strategies, time is the most important factor. Once we mark this out on the 5-minute chart, we're just going to look to see if an inverse fair value gap forms within this time window. And once it does, we want to place a trade with the stop loss covering the fair value gap and targeting to R. And if no inverse fair value gap forms within this time, then there is no trade. And some additional rules here. If the trade isn't closed out already, I want to close out all trades by 1:50 p.m. for a partial win or loss. That's just based on my back test. I did see that 1:50 p.m. just seemed like a good time to close out, and that's right before the start of the second silver bullet time window. Here's an example of how that would look like. Here we see I marked out 9:50 and 11:10. Should have moved it over. But the green line is 11:15. And we see that this inverse fair value gap formed within this window. So we see there's a gap here, and it overlaps with this gap. And so I place a stop loss here, covering this entry fair value gap, targeting 2R. And for risk management, I want to risk at most 1% of the trading account per trade for the funded challenge. If 2 losses are taken at 1% in a row, drop to 0.5% risk. If 2 losses are taken at 0.5%, drop to 0.25%, and then stay at 0.25% risk until the loss is recouped. And so, similar to the risk management that I was using previously, I still want to stick with it because I didn't really give this risk management plan a fair shot at being tested because I broke it so much. So, especially when it comes to not trading after 2 losses. And so I do want to continue refining my exit strategy using the consequent encroachment or midpoint of fair value gaps, but this also might change because another thing that I was thinking about was if price actually just disrespects the entire fair value gap. So instead of the consequent encroachment, if price disrespects it entirely to close out. And as usual, we do want to journal each trade. And so this is the checklist that I'll be using before each trade. I want to check off every single criteria before I place the trade. And so I'll be filming myself in real time doing that, like I mentioned. So this is something that I want to continue forward testing, the exit strategy and trade management. Like I mentioned, if price disrespects the entry fair value gap, I want to exit the trade. If price reaches 1 RR or 1 risk to reward, then I'll move the stop loss to break even. So those are the 2 things I'll do to help manage a trade. Very specific. So hopefully I'm not doing too much and being emotional this time around, but like I mentioned, I do want to redeem myself for the poor trading up to date. And so in terms of next steps, now that I've updated my plan, I'm going to be forward testing it while taking the futures and Forex challenges. I'll be moving forward with the video format of filming live and checking the criteria off before I place my trades. So you could see how I'm trading and thought process or ideas that I have during the time of execution. I am hoping to trade the right way this time. And in terms of prop firms, I'll probably use Top Step. I've been hearing a lot of great things about them, but if you guys have any suggestions, I'm open to them. So please feel free to comment them below. Yeah, that's it for this video. You can expect more consistent content now that this strategy has been refined for now. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.